Recently, I got a request to make a tutorial of the fill that you just watched. That fill is from the last chorus of the song I Came For You by Planetshakers. You can find my full video tutorial of that over here. The original is at 76 beats per minute, so before we get into the breakdown, I will slow that down for you so you can see what you're getting into and also have the notation and sticking on the screen so you can follow along. Here's the fill at 60 beats per minute and then 40 beats per minute. If you can learn this fill from the demonstration and the notation just now, then that's great. My job here is technically done because you have learned a practical sextuplet fill, and it's pretty useful in a lot of different contexts. But if you want to learn more about how to get to this fill from just playing your sextuplets on a practice pad, or how to break it down for your practice session, or how to make your own fills that are inspired from this one, then stay tuned. For the rest of this video, I'll be going through step by step the various concepts that make up this fill and how I would work on each of them individually to just explore that particular idea before combining them into this final fill. Each of these stages can actually be taken and explored on their own. So if there's any particular stage that you run into an exercise that you can't do easily, then pause the video, grab your practice logbook, write down that idea, and the next time you have some practice time on the kit, work on that idea. Do it for the next 2 practice sessions or the next week. Whatever it is, if you spend the time to just explore that idea that you can't do really easily, it's going to expand your vocabulary so much more. But we may be getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here, so step 1, we need to know how to play sextuplets. Sextuplets are basically 6 notes in one count. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now we're going to be really practical here, and in most slow to medium song tempos, you don't need to play one entire bar of sextuplets. Again, this depends on genre, but just generally speaking, it's gonna be a bit much. So just imagine with me, you're playing this groove, it goes like doom, ga, doom, doom, ga. The rest of the band is gonna be like, man, when is that fill ever going to end? It's just a little bit overkill for most applications at a medium speed. So for our purposes, we'll just be using 2 counts of sextuplets as a half bar fill in single strokes, and this will start on count 3 and end on count 1. So this first exercise will be 2 counts of 8th notes followed by 2 counts of sextuplets. You don't need a drum set to play this. I'm just going to tap on my table so you can follow along with whatever surface you have. Now that you're comfortable with the subdivision of sextuplets, it's time to bring that to the drum set. So now we'll be taking our 2 counts of 12 notes total and playing that on the snare drum. This will be 2 counts of time, sextuplet fill starting on count 3, and then you land on the crash on beat 1. When I played that fill on the snare drum, I lost the 8th note pulse that was coming from the hi-hats in the groove, and I also lost the low frequency sound that's coming from the bass drum. So to remedy this, I can add the bass drum notes in 8th notes underneath my fill. Notice how your right hand is going to line up with the bass drum on the downbeats, and your left hand is going to line up with the bass drum on the upbeats. Next up, we have orchestration of the fill. Orchestration refers to playing the same sticking pattern, so our single strokes, across different elements of the drum kit. In this case, we'll just be looking at the snare and the toms. Assuming that we're playing a slow or medium tempo song and something like a ballad, or in the church context, it'll be your slower worship songs. Usually, the most convenient way to orchestrate your fills, or the safest way, I might say, is to go clockwise around the drum set. So that goes from high to low if your drum set is set up conventionally. And that is not the only way to play fills, and it's not a rule that fills must be played clockwise. But when you're starting out, it's usually the safest and most easily applicable way to orchestrate your fills. When we're moving clockwise around the drums, the most convenient thing to do is to lead with your right hand when changing surfaces. And that means we will be playing even numbered groupings in our sextuplet pattern in order to change to the next drum with your right hand. So for example, if I was playing 4 notes on the snare and 4 notes on the floor tom, in right hand lead single strokes, it would be something like this. And it's really easy for me to move from the snare to the floor tom because by the time I finish the third stroke, my right hand is totally done with the snare. It can go over to the floor tom while my left hand is playing the snare, and then right hand plays the floor tom, left hand has time to go over. If I try doing 3 notes here, an odd numbered grouping, I'm gonna have this problem where my right hand is still playing the snare and my left hand wants to go over to the floor tom. So it's either going to cross over and then my right hand is stranded here, or it needs to wait and then my right hand has to move out of the way and then your left hand plays here. So it's not an impossible thing to practice and do, but it's slightly less efficient. So for this particular exercise, we will be orchestrating the fill in groups of 2, 4, 2, and 4. That's 2 notes on the snare, 4 notes on the high tom, 2 notes on the mid tom, 4 notes on the floor tom. And this is how it sounds. This was just one example of how you can orchestrate your fills. You can come up with your own grouping patterns as long as they add up to 12, which is your 2 counts of sextuplets, and they're all even numbers. You're going to move with your right hand each time, and you can just experiment with that and find out what you like. I'm just going to play a couple of even numbered grouping fills clockwise around the kit, and if you can tell what number groupings I was using, just leave a comment. I'll let you know if you're correct. Now, our previous orchestrations were all great, smooth, and hopefully musical sextuplet fills, but if you spend enough time exploring this concept, you'll notice that all of them start to sound a little bit similar. And the reason is the way you're orchestrating those fills is actually probably unintentionally emphasizing the downbeat triplet feel. The triplet will occur every 2 sextuplet notes, which is basically where all your right hand notes fall. So as long as you're changing the surface with your right hand in this particular sticking pattern, it's always going to emphasize that downbeat triplet. To change this up, we could learn to change drums leading with our left hand, or we could just play a left hand lead sextuplet fill instead. This has exactly the same effect. This is pretty much the secret sauce behind the fill that we're talking about today, but we're gonna have to break it down from scratch again because the left hand needs some training too. So here is the drum fill only on the snare, starting with left hand lead, and then I'll add in the bass drum in 8th notes. Now you'll realize that because I started with my left hand, this series of 12 notes is an even numbered pattern, and so it's going to end up with a left hand crash. If I don't want to end with a left hand crash, I want to crash with my right hand, one way I can come out of this fill is to remove the very last snare drum note, which was a right hand note in this case, and replace it with a bass drum note, so that now my right hand is free to go to the crash. And that means you're going to end with a kind of fast double, which is the last sextuplet note on the kick going into the crash and kick together on 1. So that can be a bit tricky. Slow it down and practice with a metronome if you can't work it up to speed yet, but I'll just show you how that sounds. And now it is time to orchestrate this left hand lead fill. Because we're starting with our left hand, but we still want to change drums with our right hand, because that's the convenient way to move clockwise, the first grouping is going to be an odd number, and then we will have even numbers for the rest of the fill. So in this case, instead of 2, 4, 2, 4, we're going to have one note on the snare, then we will have 4 notes on the high tom, right, left, 2 notes on the mid tom, 4 notes on the floor tom, and the last one will be a single note on the bass drum before we crash. So that's like 1, 4, 2, 4, 1. That still adds up to 12, I think. Alright, congratulations if you have got it this far. Your fill is almost complete. There's only one small thing to add, and that is adding a couple notes before beat 3. So far we've been looking at this as a half bar fill, which means we have 2 counts of time, and then the fill starts on beat 3 and 4, and that makes up your 4 counts for one whole bar. But if you do this, your fills can sound a bit choppy. It's like you played groove and then you suddenly stopped in the middle of the bar and you executed your fill and then you continued playing the groove. And you might not always want that to happen. It can be an effect used on purpose, but if you want to blend your fill in with the rest of your groove, one way you can do that is to start before a downbeat. In this case, we're going to start on the N of 2, and that would be an 8th note count. An 8th note count will contain 3 16th note triplets, which is another way that we can talk about sextuplets. So this is going to be right, left, right on the N of 2, and just stick that in front of the fill that we're playing. One more slight change to this: instead of playing that right, left, right just on the snare, the very first right hand note, which is on the N of 2 itself, is going to be played on your timekeeping cymbal, whether it's the hi-hat or the ride, together with the bass drum. And a lot of times when drummers are playing their grooves, they're playing a lot of cymbal notes, and then they go for the fill and it's only drums. Like, there's a very clear separation between the timekeeping on cymbal and fill on the shells. So in order to blend your groove and your fills a bit better, one thing you can do is add a couple of notes that are basically a cymbal and kick. And this just starts off our fill, right hand and foot together. This can be a little bit tricky if you haven't tried starting a fill in the middle of a beat before. So let's just isolate the first 2 counts of this pattern. So that'll be beats 1 and 2, and we will stop on the left hand snare note on 3 and rest on beat 4. And just repeat that a couple times until you're comfortable with it first. Okay, so you have your tiny little half a beat sextuplet fill on the N of 2. Now we just need to join it together with the rest of the fill, and we have the whole pattern down. there we have your practical sextuplet fill with a lot of bonus breakdown in between. If you're still working sextuplets into your vocabulary, I hope this has been a useful one for you to take away a whole bunch of ideas. Not just that one fill that I played, but the whole concept that you can take one fill that one drummer did and break it down into so many component steps. If you really take the time to explore each of those steps, you will increase your vocabulary by way more times than just one fill. Shout out again to Danny for requesting this video because honestly, if you hadn't asked, I don't think I would have thought that this would be an interesting topic, but hopefully it is. If you learned anything from this, then you can thank him as well. So if any of you guys have other drumming related questions that you think I could help with, ask away. I am looking forward to hearing from you. I actually have to go and eat dinner now, so I will leave you guys with the links to the full playthrough over here, as well as a more macro commentary on the music in this song over here. And I will just go and eat now. So have a great day, you guys. Bye. Okay. I think I think that's it. Oh man.